Everyone, and welcome back to Metis Speaks. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today we're diving into one of the great debates of the writing world. Are you a plotter or a pantser? If you're not familiar with these terms, don't worry. I'll be breaking them down and exploring the benefits of both approaches to writing. Plus, I'm going to share my own journey of moving from being a pantser to more of a plotter as I evolved in my writing career. So let's get started with what these terms actually mean. A plotter is a writer who likes to plan out their story in detail before they even write the first word. They create outlines, character arcs, story beats. They know the twists and turns before they put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. On the other hand, a pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants. They don't plan much or at all and prefer to dive right into writing, letting the story unfold naturally as they go. Now, there are benefits to both approaches, and today we're going to look at the strengths of each. I'll give you some insight into my own experience, transitioning from being more of a pantser in my early writing days to becoming a plotter, especially now that I'm doing more collaborative work as a book coach. Let's start with pantsers, shall we? If you're a new writer, especially someone just starting out and just now dipping your toes into fiction, there's something really freeing about pantsing. You're not bogged down by outlines or rigid story structures, which means you can really explore your creativity in the moment. The story is much more of a surprise to you as it is to your characters, and the spontaneity can make writing feel like an adventure. When I started out as a writer, I leaned heavily into this style. I would get an idea for a character or a scene, and I'd just start writing. No plan, no outline, just raw creativity flowing through the page. And honestly, it was a great way to get the ideas out there, especially in those early days. It's exciting to just see where the story takes you. But while pantsing is great for generating ideas and getting that first draft down quickly, it does have its downsides. Because you're just kind of making it up as you go, you might run into plot holes or find that the story meanders a bit too much. This often means a lot more work on the back end. There's a lot more editing required after the fact, and sometimes you realize you need to rewrite entire sections of your story. Guilty of that. That's where the plotter's approach can really shine. So now let's talk about plotters. This approach is all about organization and structure. Plotters spend a lot of time before writing, creating detailed outlines, plotting out character arcs, and working through story beats. This method can help prevent some of the challenges that pantsers face, like plot holes or those wandering storylines. For me, as I became more experienced, and especially as I started working as a book coach, I found that plotting became essential. When you're collaborating with other writers or working on multiple projects at once, having a roadmap is crucial. You can't afford to just wing it when you're on a deadline or when you're guiding someone else through the creative process. As a plotter, you get to look at the big picture. You can see how each part of the story fits together before you even write it, and this helps keep the narrative tight and focused. Plus, knowing where your story is headed allows you to build tension and plant clues for future events. Foreshadowing, ahaha. This also makes the writing process a lot more efficient and in many cases smoother, especially when it comes to revision time. But does that mean plotting is always the better approach? Not necessarily. Some writers find that over-plotting can make the writing feel mechanical or take the fun out of the discovery of the moment. Really, what it comes down to is finding the right balance. As I mentioned earlier, I started out as a pantser. For those early drafts, especially when I was still figuring out my voice and my process, pantsing worked great. It allowed me to explore ideas without restriction, and it gave me a lot of material to work with. But over time, as I began working on more complex projects, and especially when I started coaching other writers, I realized that I needed more structure. When you're helping someone else plot out their book or manage multiple drafts at once, a clear plan becomes essential. That's when I made the shift toward being more of a plotter. I found that by creating detailed outlines and character arcs, I could collaborate more effectively, meet deadlines, and ensure the story didn't go off track. I still love the freedom of pantsing sometimes, especially when brainstorming new ideas or getting into a creative flow. But now I've learned to use plotting as a tool to guide that creativity. It's really about, again, balancing these two approaches. So what does that mean for you as a writer? Well, I guess it depends on your process. If you're just starting out, I encourage you to try both methods. Experiment. Pantsing can be a fantastic way to get your creative juices flowing, especially if the thought of outlining feels too rigid or intimidating. But don't be afraid to embrace plotting later on, especially if you find yourself needing more structure. You might find that a hybrid approach works best for you. Maybe you start as a pantser, writing freely, and then go back to plot the story out after your first draft. Or maybe you prefer having a detailed outline from the start, but leave room for spontaneity along the way. There's really no right or wrong way to write, and that's really the beauty of it. At the end of the day, the most important thing is finding what works for you and helps you get those words on the page. And that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode. So whether you're a plotter or a pantser, the key is to keep writing and experimenting with what works for you. If you want to see how I approach storytelling, I'd love for you to check out my new story on Kindle Vella. You can find it by searching for Elementals by S.C. Lauren on Amazon. And don't forget to hit follow to stay updated with each new episode. Thank you so much for joining me today on Metis Speaks. I hope you found this discussion helpful, and I can't wait to hear from you about whether or not you're a plotter, a pantser, or somewhere in between. Remember, creativity is a journey, and there's no wrong path as long as you keep moving forward. Until next time, this is Stephanie, reminding you to embrace your creativity and let your stories take flight. Stay inspired with Metis Speaks.